Good morning, everybody. You're very welcome back to the Agri-Motive Farm Machinery YouTube channel. To everyone who watched the video last week, thank you very much. To all our new subscribers, you're very, very welcome. To everyone who watched the video last week, everyone who commented, gave it a thumbs up, thank you very much. We had a great conversation about Leyland tractors last week. We learned a lot, and a lot of people shared their experiences with them down through the years, from when they were new to, as they got older, and issues that had arose them. And I got a little bit more of an insight into the problems that arose with Leyland, in particular the four-wheel drive tractors. So to everyone that commented, thank you very much. To everyone that's watching now, if you're liking the videos, please do like and subscribe. And if you can, share the video, because it does help the channel greatly. So all that out of the way, yeah, you're very welcome back to the channel. So last week, yes, we spoke about Leyland. This week, we're going to take up where we left off. So the demise of Leyland, and how they went from Leyland into Marshall, and the sort of political connections, the process that was behind that change from Leyland into Marshall, and then the demise of the Marshall tractors. We're going to deal with, basically today, we're going to deal with that changeover. What happened? What came about? What was the influence of it? Um, I will, as I said last week, I will be doing another video on Marshall. Marshall has a huge history going um, right back about 100 years. So from the start of Marshall right through, I'm going to do another video on Marshall. So the crawler tractors, I'm going to look at them more in detail and stuff like that. But today we're dealing with from the Leyland era onwards, about the changeover and the few of the models that they had produced right up until the late 1980s. So yeah, over here in the west of Ireland this week, it has been, as it has been throughout most of the country, it has been snowing, it has been freezing, it has been beautiful sunshine, and it has been raining, and it has been windy. So we've had pretty much four seasons all week. But today I did manage to get out for a drive, out towards Spiddle. Anyone that's familiar with that area out there, drive out towards Rossaville. There was a beautiful view out across Galway Bay, out to the Aran Islands, and across to the Burn. And I did manage to get some beautiful footage on the camera from one of the beaches. I also got into sort of a vintage souvenir shop, picked up a few little bits and pieces for the man cave, the obligatory kind of posters and signs. And I got a lovely one there of a John Deere 4020. So I had a 4020 when I was a child, a toy one, of course, that I played with day in, day out, and my sons actually played with it day in, day out as well. And I've no doubt that my grandchildren will play with it as well. So I always wanted one of those. And of course, I got a lovely little one there on the board as well. So they're going up on the wall in the man cave. I haven't been out in it recently because it's been too windy, it's been too wet and too noisy. So all the videos that you haven't seen for the last while are indoors. So Marshall, so 1974. The Fowler Works in Leeds was closed and all activity concentrated at Gainsborough, and in 1975 TW Ward Limited sold Marshall to British Leyland, who merged it with Aveling Barford Products to form Aveling Marshall, who made track crawlers and wheel loaders. However, British Leyland had decided at this stage to sell off non-core businesses because of, as we spoke last week, the issues, the financial issues they were having, especially coming from the car industry. So this was around 1979, and the British Leyland Specialist Products division, of which Aveling Marshall was part, was sold to businessman Charles Nickerson, owner of Marshall Marshall, Sons and Co. So briefly spoke about Charles Nickerson last week. He was a farmer, he was a businessman and a farmer. He farmed something around 900 acres, mainly tillage crops. So he grew wheat and he grew barley. And he used his Marshall tractors for his ploughing and his cultivation works, but he also wanted to move into the wheel tractor market. So he went out, he looked to see who was out there. Leyland became available, and he went for it from that end of things. And he used his farm, as he had his estate, to test out machines before they went to the market. And because he was a farmer, he had an insight into what was happening down the line with machinery and stuff. So he was a very, very savvy businessman, very wealthy businessman, and he was very hands-on with the move and with the change and with how the process of building tractors actually changed from within when it was in Bathgate, when he moved it back down to his site. How the factory was ran was completely changed. So he had produced crawler tractors, Track Marshall Limited name, and in 1982 acquired British Leyland tractor business. He moved the tractor assembly from Bathgate, Scotland, down to Gainsborough, where he built tractors under the Marshall name. So this deal was conditional, of course, on him sourcing the engines and some other parts from the Bathgate factory for a minimum of 3 years. So of course there would have been still, the Bathgate factory would have been still under operation. In regards to the buses and the truck end of things, it would have been still building the famous engines, the Leyland engines there. So the purchase was conditional on him still buying parts and the engines from the Bathgate factory. So when we look at that move by Leyland to move to Bathgate for production of the tractor, so while the intent to relieve unemployment in southern Scotland was of course a noble cause in practice, the southern transference of the miners that we spoke about last week to production line operatives was never going to go smoothly, and the factory was rarely remarked upon for its exemplary industrial relations, as you can imagine. The management also had other concerns. These included the expense of bringing parts up in the Midlands, while their component manufacturers had resolutely stayed put, despite the incentives to get them to move north to be closer to their major customers. And so it was by the mid-1970s, the government decided that something had to be done, that something culminated in the Ryder Report, a drastic restructuring of the company, nationalisation, and the eventual appointment of Sir Michael Edwards as the chief executive in 1977. Soon afterwards, Margaret Thatcher was elected as the Prime Minister in the UK, and her disdain for unions nationalised industrials, and it was often alleged industry itself was well known. So it wasn't long before British Leyland started to feel the chill winds of change around its wheel axles, as the case may be. You know, when you look at Charles Nicholson, you know, the sale to him, he got wind that Leyland were in trouble, that they were planning on either wrapping up the tractor business or selling it. And I believe at the time the preferred route from Leyland itself was to actually just wrap up the tractor end of things. But he made an approach to Leyland to buy out the tractor end of it. And this in itself is not without precedent. You know, Nicholson himself had already bought Aveling Barford from British Leyland in 1979 without any controversy. But that was a local deal, so a wealthy farmer buying a mainly agricultural asset from a diverse corporation in the throes of streamlining its operations. The purchase of the wheeled tractor line and its relocation to a rural county nearly 300 miles away with a direct loss of 900 jobs was a different league altogether. So this was obviously going to be, you know, a huge blow to the area around South Scotland, around Bathgate. You know, naturally this did not go down too well with the factory floor, and you know, and a work-in was organised with successful start of the sale for some time. You know, that it put a delay on it. You know, it was inevitable it was going to happen, but you know, they made that point, you know, that they weren't going to go without a fight. So the issue was also taken up with the local MP in the area, Tom Dale, I think it was Tom Dale, yeah, a noted thorn in the side of the Thatcher administration. So throughout late 1981, Dale reputedly, you know, raised the question of the sale in Parliament, attacking it on two main fronts. The first was that the effect it would have on the jobs and its consistency, claiming that the post-sale there would be a 26% unemployment rate. We also questioned the probity of the sale itself, using such words as a rip-off and commercial treachery, while also aiming his venom at the management, who accused of having their snouts in the trough. So they were obviously getting something, a backhand out of it. Further, he brought into question disposal of a public asset, noting that the Roots factory in Linwood was sold for less than 10 million when the book value was over 200 million. He also prophetically raised the spectre of the deindustrialisation of Britain, a contentious subject at the time and one that is hardly settled now. When put under the spotlight, the sale might have been a microcosm of that troubled era, an aging product range suffering with a lack of development funds, for whatever reason, been swept away rather than nurtured and brought up to date. The arguments as to whether this was the correct approach are purely political, but it is certain that Tom Dale saw the sale as a step towards the closing down of the tractor end of the business. So the sale was eventually finalised with all the assets, including the production machinery and 600 fully completed tractors, trucked down to Lincolnshire for the grand total of £6 million. Now, when you look at that, he got some bargain there. Like, there was no way that Charles Nicholson was going in to be screwed. So let's leave aside the actual business itself. He bought 600 fully completed tractors as well as the business for £6 million. Now, you take those 600 tractors, if you take an average price for those at the time was probably, say it was £10,000 sterling. So 600 by 10,000 is 6 million. So he either got a free business or 600 free tractors. Did he pay 6 million for the business or 6 million for the tractors? But he definitely got a bargain. So, you know, in addition to this, he also acquired all the tooling and multiple amounts of spare parts, as well as full rights to continue in production. Yeah, so it's mad to think, you know, 600 tractors for €6 million. There's a lot of tractors out there today that, you know, would cost close to £1 million a piece. Yeah, so it just puts everything into perspective. Edward Ley had countered by noting that the deal had subsequently been finalised and approved by the Public Accounts Committee, and the 2 new models were planned. These would appear to be based around, you know, the 98 series engine, which was still in production at Bathgate. Yet that was not all that emerged. Ley also let slip that in 1981, Track Marshal of Gainsborough, so obviously before the sale, had learnt that the British Leyland tractor line at Bathgate was doomed. The inference being that Leyland management did not seek a buyer as often is cited. Instead, they were probably planning on simply just closing down the tractor production altogether before Charles Nicholson stepped in to buy it. So he got wind that there was a deal to be done, and he knew he could get it at the right price. Looking back, when you look at the end of the Leyland line moving into Marshall, they were quite dated at the time. They had their troubles. As we spoke about last week, the engineering, design and planning hadn't put into the later models. Some of them were very good tractors, excellent tractors, but when you seen what was coming down the line, so like in 1981, Massey Ferguson brought out the 600 range to replace the 500 models. Ford had launched the 10 series, fantastic line of tractors, and you also had John Deere there as well, and Case, you had John Deere with the 40 series, which would have been way ahead in terms of, you know, comfort and styling, your SG2 cabs. You had the 4000 series, then you had the high horsepower 4040s and 4440s, 4650s, 40s. They had, you know, Marshall were way behind the likes of Massey Ferguson, Ford, John Deere and Case, who were massive companies at the time, massive companies, and it was, you know, it was going to be impossible to try and deal with them. So that would lead you to believe that, you know, they weren't willing to invest the money in it, and it was going to take either an outside buyer to come in and buy it cheap, or they were just going to wrap it up altogether. And Charles Nicholson, of course, he would have been aware of all this as much as anyone else. So the promise of further investment and new models sounds somewhat hollow now. So indeed, Marshall went on to assemble only around 1,000 new tractors in total before finally calling in the receivers towards September 1985, little more than a year after the local MP had roundly defended it and the acquisition of the Leyland tractor line. So Marshall Tractors Limited then was a company set up following the purchase by the Nicholson Group of the tractor operations of Leyland in 1981. The Leyland range was rebranded as Marshall, a relaunch with a new colour scheme. You know, but we had seen the Leyland had moved to that Harvest Gold before they actually became Marshall. The company was sold later then in 1985 to McConnell Tractors and later resold. Teakstones buys and then sells out to Bentel Simplex, who then rebadges various makes of tractors as a Marshall. A former dealer, John Charnley and Sons of Brindle near Chorley, Lancashire, buys up stock of parts and then buys the remaining rights the design rights for the machines, and the company itself basically just became a part supply company to the likes of your Leyland, Nuffield and Marshall tractors. But the later brands of Marshall tractors, they weren't Marshalls, they were a mix of IWT, they were Steyr, I think Ferrari as well actually made a lot of tractors for them. We'll have a quick look through the model lineup now. We won't get into too much detail, we'll be doing that in another video. We'll just have a quick look at the model lineup. So you had that small range of tractors that were built with Perkins engines, but they were built in Yugoslavia and by IMT, and they were built in Italy by Ferrari. So you had tractors like the 132 and the 154, the 224 which was built by Ferrari in Italy. You had the 245 which was Perkins powered again, that was built in Italy as well. You had the 264 built in Italy, and then you had the 302 which was built by BM in Turkey. Moving on up then, we were familiar then with the 502 which was 50 horsepower, two-wheel drive, the 504, the 602, the 604, 702, 704, 802 and the 804. They were basically what came from Leyland into the Marshall brand, the same tractors that were just redeveloped, rebranded as the Marshall tractors. You also had the 100 series then that Charles Nicholson had launched with great enthusiasm in around, I think it was 1984. So the 100 series, you had the 100 and it was the 115 and the 125, and these were a bigger tractor. These were, I suppose, they were to take on the 500 series Ferguson and the 600 series in that higher horsepower category. Now, not very many of them were built, not very many of them were sold. The tractors, you know, they were probably one of the last tractors that were actually produced by Leyland Marshall themselves, by the factory. The replacements then for the 602s and that, you had the 752, 752X, the 754X, 754XL. So they would have been built from 87 to 89. So again, this is coming to the end of the line of the actual factory itself. From there on in, you're looking at tractors that were bought in and just branded as Marshalls using the Marshall name, but obviously produced elsewhere. Yeah, so your replacement then for your 802, that was your 852, your 852X, your 852XL, 844. These were all Perkins engines at this stage, so the 3-year deal was up. You know, all engines were outsourced. They weren't Leyland, they were Perkins now at this stage. Moving on then, you had the 954, which was a 95 horsepower. You know, you had the 904, one of the last with the Leyland engine. You had the Marshall 1800, which was actually a Valmet tractor. And from then on, from 1989 onwards, you had everything was built in Austria by Steyr. So you had the 644, the 742, the 744, the 842. Now we will talk more about these machines in detail. This is just a brief overview of what models were there. They were all made by Steyr, and they were just brought in and badged as Marshalls, just to see the brand out as a going concern. So the last of them then would have been, you know, the likes of the 644, which was a Marshall, oh sorry, a Steyr. You know, the 8000 series of Steyr tractors. Anyone that's familiar with Steyr, the 8000 series tractors would have been the last of the Marshalls built in Austria, and that was it. So it just basically the tractor end was phased out, and the company from then on in that owned it, that Thickstones, that owned the name Marshall, they just sold parts for Nuffield, parts for Marshall, and parts for Leyland tractors. And there is millions of them around the world, and there still is millions of them around the world, and obviously they require parts, and it was big business at the time keeping them going. So look, that's it, that's really it. it was a sorry old end. You know, economics got the better of it. You know, government policies got the better of them. It's a shame that, you know, those sort of names, homegrown British names, just kind of fizzled out. And, you know, when you look at the machines that are out there today working, there's very, very few homegrown names. They're all swallowed up by one corporation. When you look at AGCO, and obviously John Deere obviously was one of the ones that I had said before had stuck to their name from they're one of the only companies that, all right, they have swallowed up other companies, but John Deere have remained on their own, stood on their own feet from the start to the end. And on that note, I would say goodbye. Next week's videos will be about John Deere. So I'm going to start at the first of the John Deere tractors. So where it went from John Deere, where they got into tractors. So next Sunday's video will be about John Deere. Tonight's video, I suppose, was a little bit different. It's a little bit more political. It was about that changeover, that corporate kind of world that swallowed up Leyland and Marshall in the end. I am doing another video about Marshall, and I'll have the track machines. I'll have Marshall from the start and looking more specifically at the tractors themselves, at the machinery. So that is it. That's it for today. Everybody have a good Sunday, and don't forget, next Sunday, apart from John Deere, is Mother's Day. Well, it is in Ireland. I'm not sure about around the world, but in Ireland it's Mother's Day. So don't forget all the mammies in your life. So until that, good luck.